Hello everyone, as always, I'm Vlad Sparastoria. I shoot and I know something about shooting, and this is one. Tanfoglio Stock 2. The Tanfoglio Stock 2 is one of the options that Tanfoglio offers for those looking for a pistol, for practical shooting. Especially to start practical shooting and to use that category in IPSC, which is called production. If you don't know, IPSC is the most important federation for practical shooting at a certain level. There's also IDPA, but IDPA is a bit different, not to take anything away from IDPA. IPSC has a category called production. In other words, you have to use guns exactly as they came out of the factory. The original idea was to really use carry pistols, but then, little by little, companies started to take advantage of this a bit. Because if the requirement is that it has to be a production model, well, I produce a model made to win competitions. Already with an improved trigger. I don't know if I'm making myself clear. So a lot of firearms were created, like the CZ Shadow, for example, which are specifically designed to compete in the production division. So they're made for a particular sporting need, just like many other sports things. They exist because the rules exist. That doesn't change the fact that the Tanfoglio stock has a reputation for being good pistols for sport shooting. And here, at the Legnano shooting range, at the National Target Shooting Range of Legnano, we got one. So by the way, if you want to try it, it's usually available here for rent. But I was also a bit curious to see how it works and how it performs. Sporting weapons, especially true sporting ones, aren't really my specialty, as you probably know. Surplus service guns are much more my thing, also because there's often a lot more to read about them. But anyway, we're into shooting sports, and every now and then it's worth taking a look at this kind of gun. Mechanically, speaking of the Tanfoglio, all these Tanfoglios are derived from the CZ75, a very interesting design that we've talked about in the past. The interesting thing about the CZ75 is that it was designed for export, but it wasn't patented. And there were many companies like Tanfoglio that simply, in the 70s, recognizing the value of the design, copied it. But the Tanfoglios are not perfect copies of the CZ. They have their own soul and many different features. Actually, let's do this. Let's move the camera, take a closer look at it, and then come back here to the shooting range to try it out. So let's take a close look at our Tanfoglio Stock 2. How do we know it's the Tanfoglio Stock 2? Because first of all, obviously, very clearly, it's written on the left side of the gun, while the right side has other information like the caliber and so on. Warnings before using guns, like saying, be careful, it has to be written on the gun, because you never know. Some idiot picks it up and thinks, no, wait, I haven't read the manual, better be careful, it's a gun. All right, let's see. Let's take a look at the controls for a moment. We obviously have quite clearly the trigger, which, by the way, I think has the most aggressive curve I've ever seen on a semi-automatic pistol. It's really almost a semicircle, and I'm not exaggerating. A trigger that has here a small screw that can be tightened or loosened to adjust it. The distance it reaches after firing, the over travel stop, by tightening or loosening it. I can add or remove a bit of travel based on personal preference. What other controls do we have? Obviously, the large prominent magazine release is an oversized button that really sticks out from the weapon. Then we have the slide stop lever, as it's called in English, and the safety, which works both when the gun is cocked and uncocked. Also, because it's typical of triggers derived from the CZ75, it's both double and single action, although, note well, it doesn't work exactly like in the CZs. Like a decocker, if someone was looking for this feature, it's not there. Then we have a front sight, and at the back, as is quite typical in this type of firearm, an adjustable rear sight. It helps if we want to perfect our shooting based on our needs, the distance, the type of ammunition, and many other things. If you really get into precision shooting, trying to make hole-in-hole shots from a very long distance, it becomes more magic than science. On the other side, we have the safety as well, but not the slide stop lever. Slide, we can also clearly see here the extractor of the firearm. Ergonomically speaking, we'll talk a bit more about it during the shooting test, but it's a firearm that feels pretty good in the hand. I'll start by saying one thing. It's heavy. This is a feature that we see repeatedly during reviews, especially when analyzing firearms that were specifically designed for it. For sport, for winning sporting competitions. You wouldn't want to carry it in a defensive holster all day, besides the fact that legally in Italy you can't. But that's another story. It's heavy because this gives stability and recoil control. It has this really long, it's really long beaver tail here on the grip to get a good hold on it. By the way, you can grip it really high like this with your hand, so it actually encourages you pretty cleverly to keep your hand as high as possible. One of the things I notice maybe during my work with novice shooters, they tend not to get their hand all the way up on the grip, even if they rest their hand on the grip. Ideally, you want to get your hand all the way up into the beaver tail. I hope you can see it on camera, and I'll tell you something. It helps because it makes you less afraid. The slide, and in any case, the material here is hard to find. You have to go in with your whole hand, so actually it's very smart. Even though I have a deep dislike, especially with the C's, for this shape back here, for the way the grip changes angle. This legendary thing, a bit legendary, a bit of this thing. We can also notice the nice wooden grips that definitely add an aesthetic touch. The gun, let's take it apart. Now, I mentioned to you that they are mechanically derived from the CZ75, but they are not interchangeable, even though the very first Tanfoglio models had some interchangeable parts. Over time, the designs evolved in different directions. So even if they look mechanically similar from a distance, their operation is that of the CZ75. They are not compatible in any way. They have many differences in tolerances, in dimensions, and the trigger system is a bit different. By the way, let me know in the comments if you're interested in seeing a comparison between Tanfoglio and CZ so we can discuss these differences. Anyway, let's disassemble the gun. We pull the slide back slightly. That way we could, if it would just cooperate, take it out. Take out the slide stop lever, which we also need for disassembly. This way, by the way, it's very tight here. The tolerances are very tight. There's very little play when you put it in, which is a good thing. To be precise, we can separate the frame from the slide, the barrel, and the recoil spring. Let's take a look at the slide, and we can remove the recoil spring. Would you like to remove the barrel now? But there's still one more piece. Here it is flying off. This little bushing that's used for the recoil spring. Try not to lose it, so now we can remove the barrel in the classic way. A Colt 1911, I was doing it the wrong way, going to remove the barrel. The first thing that really stands out on this Tanfoglio is the conical barrel. As you can see, it's wider at the front and a little narrower at the back. Where, among other things, we also find the locking lugs, very classic here from the Browning system, which fit into the corresponding recesses in the slide itself, of the barrel itself. And why the conical barrel? Now, the explanation lies in the pursuit of accuracy. The Browning system, as designed by John Moses Browning, especially for the Colt 1911. It's a fantastic system as far as pistol operation is concerned, and deservedly so. Rightfully, it's the most widely used system of all. As far as the operation of semi-automatic pistols is concerned, the ones that use a locked breech system, because I'm not talking about blowback pocket pistols. If there's a slide that needs a locking system and an operating system, 90% of the time it's the Browning system, and there's a reason for that. The design helps with feeding certain types of ammunition. There are many historical reasons why the Browning system is preferred, but the Browning system, if we have to criticize it, and above all, this was a problem early in its history. It's the accuracy, in the sense that this barrel, when it moves back and forth and returns to its position, is relatively it's relatively free to move around, to wobble, and there have been many solutions to this problem. For example, the bushing of the 1911 and the more modern 1911, and as we've seen in the past, the Colt Series 70. It uses an elastic bushing on the barrel that holds it. It keeps it in position by itself, to try to avoid that little play the barrel can have when it's in battery. And now, in the vast majority of cases, the average shooter won't notice the slightest difference. If you're not an absolute monster at shooting, honestly, if this barrel returns perfectly to position, it won't give you a different result. But it's clear that when I need to have a tool to win competitions, and I have to eliminate as many defects as possible, so to speak, mechanical defects, that's where the Browning system requires adjustments. I've already mentioned the Colt Series 70. Other firearms that try, let's say, to guide the barrel into position are, for example, the SIG P210. A very famous Swiss pistol, one of the most accurate Browning system firearms. Even that one, actually, the big secret of Peter. Maybe one day, if I get my hands on one, I'll tell you about it. It's exactly how the barrel is guided back into position. It's one of the things that the conical barrel does as it widens. In the end, then, fitting perfectly. In theory, it fills the gaps in the slide, but still leaves some space here so it can move and oscillate. And to try to mitigate this problem, it needs to combine reliable operation with the tightest possible tolerance. When the barrel returns to the end of its travel, like here in battery, this is one of the solutions that can be adopted to achieve accuracy in these Browning type systems. And that's what Tanfoglio does. Let's take one last look also at the frame of the weapon, a relatively heavy frame. But here too, the hole for the disassembly lever, the transfer bar, and we also quite clearly notice the weapon's ejector. Again with the safety here, which works. Knowing this, there's not much else to say at this point, at least for now. Let's reassemble the weapon for a moment. Let's put the barrel back in. It's bushing before we lose it. And the spring in the back. I'll get it. Here we go. Let's mount everything on the rails, pull the slide back, and then we can reinsert it. Here is the slide stop lever that holds everything together. Let's try it out together. Let's test it. So we have a target at 12 meters. Let's see what we can do. And after firing the last shot, the gun stays open. So my very, very first impressions. It shoots straight. It shoots straight. Especially if you take a moment to aim and shoot a bit more cleanly. So from this point of view, it absolutely does its job. The sights are pretty standard and quite easy to see. It doesn't have major difficulties from this point of view. But I repeat, this is just my own fixation, right? Remember, a lot of people, damn it, hear me talking about weapons. And then they go around saying that Vlad doesn't like this, Vlad said something stupid. No, Vlad expresses a lot of personal opinions. One of the things I don't really like about gun grips is when they have this indentation here. I want this part to be completely straight. That works perfectly for me. Important clarification, this is just my personal preference. There's nothing wrong with it in itself. Another small note I can make, but this applies to all the CZ75s. The slide is a bit small to handle. Despite these serrations and these cuts up front, which, if they're supposed to help with manipulation, aren't particularly good to grip. The ones at the back are a little better, but right now I'm recording this in July. It's 34 degrees inside the shooting range. My hands are starting to get a little sweaty, and honestly, my hand slips a bit. Now, if I grip it properly and pay attention, it still slips a little. Anyway, it's not stopping me from handling it, but it's definitely not making me jump for joy. Let's try a few more shots and see how it goes. But these are not bad either. A bit faster in the circle. I'm curious to see how it goes even faster. Let's try it. Maybe that's what doesn't really excite me. Yeah. Which isn't bad, again. It's not a negative feature. It's not like Vlad said this is crap. But personally, I'm not crazy about the trigger, and now I'll tell you why. All in the circle. I'll show you like this, so you don't say, because you always say, I don't put up the targets, I don't put up the targets, I don't put up the targets. Because we often shoot at many different things. Sometimes there's no way to change them. Sometimes I do some sequences, then I do another one. It's impossible to distinguish shots to show you the targets. I need to do some standardized things. But since you insist, I'll show you that I'm not cheating and that I can hit something. Thank you. All there, thank you. Not bad, as we were saying, sorry. The trigger. Now, I honestly don't care at all about the shape. So many people online argue about the shape of triggers, when, frankly, I don't really care that much. I prefer to analyze other features, like how it feels on the finger and all those things. Now, the over travel screw that we saw during disassembly is set to the maximum, meaning there's the minimum possible over travel, because it's unscrewed and sticks out, so the trigger stops earlier. If I screwed it in the other direction, making it stick out, the over travel would be longer. But you know what? I'd like it even shorter. But you can't do it because the screw is at its limit, because it reaches clicks and that's it. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I don't see why you would want to have it even longer than this. And considering the fact that the reset from this position isn't very long either. Well, but the impression I get is that these two movements, release and reset, maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but again, just impressions. I almost get the impression that the travel between these two moments has a different length. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, and this thing drives me crazy. One of the things I really liked about the Canics, do you remember them? The Canics we recently brought onto the channel? And in the trigger, the forward and backward movement between reset and trigger pull was exactly 4 millimeters. Perfect, same idea. You need a symmetrical movement. Maybe it's not quite the same with the Tanfoglio. Don't sue me, but that's my impression. It doesn't bother me, since you still get results on the target. It's not bad, but I'll tell you what. Let me fire a few more shots and I'll give you a little verdict that I hope will be interesting for you. Let's see if they all go in this time. Today I won't miss a single one. If I had to choose, if I had to make a big call, it's crucial. Between the Tanfoglio stock and the CZ Shadow, I'll tell you that I marginally prefer the Tanfoglio, just a bit. I'm not crazy about the CZ Shadows. They're excellent guns, don't get me wrong, but personally for me, maybe just a little. This one, because if I already have to use a heavy gun, I might as well go all the way, so to speak. This one is heavier, bigger than the CZ Shadow. Even though I'm curious and I hope I can bring it to the channel for you. I shot the other day with a seized target that really impressed me, so I need to ask the owner of the gun to let me film it. But he was very, very impressed. Anyway, as far as first impressions go, as I mentioned before, I'd actually be curious to compare them side by side. If you're interested, let me know in the comments. But just at first glance, since I actually deal with this one and the CZ Shadow one every day, mind you, not the 2-to-1, I prefer this one. I'm referring specifically to the Shadow one, which I already prefer over the 2, so that's another story. Actually, let's try one-handed and... just outside the circle, damn it. I wanted to say that today I'm not missing a single shot. The Tanfoglio Stock 2 is a very interesting product. Definitely, if you want to buy a firearm that allows you to compete across the board with a 9mm, it's an excellent choice. In practical shooting, people speak very highly of it. And even in a simple target shooting test, it's performing excellently. It's my favorite pistol. No, I don't hide this. I have personal opinions and very strong preferences, but I absolutely appreciate it. The fact is that for many people, it's an excellent weapon. And if you buy one, honestly, it's hard to go wrong. It's working well so far. If it has problems in the future, here at the shooting range, also because it's heavily used and rented, I'll let you know. One of the cool things about working at the shooting range is this. I already told you about it in Poland. It's that you see things from another perspective, the wear and tear of the weapons. Since these weapons are fired constantly, they wear out very quickly, much faster than you ever would wear them out. And 99% of shooters, average sport shooters, even good ones, really fire thousands and thousands of rounds every year, and their guns start breaking and doing that sort of thing. So I'm curious to see how it will perform, also because it's been here with us for about a month now. I'll let you know in case anything happens. And now, as always, greetings. Thank you for watching this video. If you have interesting firearms for me to try, write to me about them. Today, as I told you, this one was offered to me by the National Shooting Range of Legnano because it's one of their rental firearms available here. If you want to directly support the channel, consider subscribing on Patreon or here on YouTube to access exclusive content, or buying the channel's t-shirts. And if you don't want to or can't do that, at least subscribe, leave a like and a comment. That's all from me for today, and as always, I'll see you next time.